The balance for the sport, it seemed that cricket provided a unique...
seriously affect the ability of dolphin pods to work, have a detrimental impact on their survival in the wild.
A western chimpanzee, which conservationists say is the world's rarest, has been born at Chester Zoo. The baby chimp has been described as a small but vital boost to the global population of the critically endangered species. Around 18,000 western chimpanzees are thought to remain in the wild. Village cricketers are no strangers to a match fee, maybe £5 or £10 to cover the cost of the balls, an umpire and of course the tees. But what about £35,000? That's the amount Coalhill Cricket Club in Dorset will have to find if its players are to stride to the crease this summer. Nearby residents bowled them a wrong-un about the risk of damage from stray balls. Our sports news reporter Ollie Foster explains.
Leather on Willow, a ripple of applause, the summer soundtrack for many an English village. But after almost 120 years, Coalhill Cricket Club is in crisis. Its beautiful ground with oak trees lining the boundary is also surrounded by several £1 million houses, well within reach of a batsman with his eye in. And some of the neighbours have had enough. Their claims for damages over a season could ruin the club. Star all-rounder Lewis Naylor has played for Coalhill for the last 10 years.
It's never nice when you've hit a ball and you see it sort of travelling at a distance towards a house or a car or something. You do kind of get that feeling in your stomach of, oh no, what's going to happen? But it's just part of the game.
Last season, the club tried to dissuade players from hitting the ball so hard a six would either score no runs or a batter would be dismissed if the ball went anywhere near anyone's greenhouse. But that just wasn't cricket, so the solution this season, to only allow junior teams to play. There was uproar. 30,000 people signed a petition, successfully calling on the committee to reverse its decision. But if the senior team want to start the season, £35,000 must be raised. That's the cost of a net to stop the ball ending up where it shouldn't. The England captain Ben Stokes has helped to promote the club's cause, and a short time ago a crowdfunding page had raised almost £15,000.
The headlines again. New figures from NHS England have revealed some of the extent of the stress on the health service, with patients last month facing record waits for ambulances and in A&E. While we've been on air, the US Attorney General has appointed a special counsel to investigate President Biden's handling of sensitive documents. Rishi Sunak is meeting Nicola Sturgeon this evening as he begins his first trip to Scotland as Prime Minister. BBC News.
This evening by Alan Smith. Next on Radio 4, Corner Shop Comedy in Fags, Mags and Bags. That's after a word from two people more suited to the science lab.
I'm Dr. Adam Rutherford.
I'm Professor Hannah Fry.
Together, we're investigating the issues that have you perplexed.
The things that you've always wondered, your everyday scientific mysteries.
Questions like, how do magnets even work?
And did aliens build the pyramids?
The answer to that is no. What about, can everyone picture images inside their mind?
Intriguingly, also no.
Your questions answered. And daredevil experiments too.
The new series of The Curious Cases of Rutherford and Fry on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds
continues on Tuesday morning at 11. Now on Radio 4, the new curator of the Lenzie House of Wax is on the warpath.
I got distracted at pause for thought. Wait till you hear this.
Can you not just tell me now?
Ramesh, pleased to be a trumpet.
Really?
Dave, you're the trumpet round here, you pure 2,000-piece jigsaw of a doofer.
I'm always the trumpet. It's more knackering than it looks. Plus, it's me that's delivering the news. You can't be your own trumpet. Caesar never trumpeted his way into the room. He got some wee goblin to do it.
You're not Caesar. What have you conquered?
Nothing. But I did invent a salad. The Dave salad.
Oh God, the Dave salad. I couldn't go near it. It had raisins in it.
Oh no, who puts raisins in a salad?
Dave does, clearly. You've ruined my announcement.
Don't worry, Dave. I'll get you back on track.
Oh, good trumpet, Malcolm. I'll be getting my jotters.
Oh, thanks. What is jotters?
Right, here is the news. Brace yourselves, you might want to sit down for this.
Just say the goddamn thing, FFS!
FFS? Is that a furniture company? I imagine they're having a sale.
Sick!
Alright, I'm just building the tension. Right, woofed. I don't remember eating that. Right, two things. Second thing first, right? They've taken the circus posters off the windows at the Wax Museum and they're pressure washing the paving at the front, so something's afoot. I know, right? But even bigger than that, Hilly Buerdine has had a perm.
Huh? Hilly Buerdine? Perm? Had?
As I live and breathe.
You probably just mean a gentle wave, Dave.
What are you, Dr. Seuss? Because he's been cancelled for doing a racist cartoon.
I wish you would do a racist cartoon.
It wasn't a gentle wave, Dave. Talcum Malcolm. It was a full perm, a full 5-pencil belter.
A full 5-pencil belter?
I know what you mean. You could put 5 pencils into it. Mrs. Geggy, my maths teacher, used to have one. She used to keep her rollies in there. Oh, she was as cool as...
Wow, 5 pencils in 1 perm. I can't wait to see this.
Wow. Wow. So this is Fags, Mags and Bags, is it? Wow. Can I just say that this shop really intrigues me?
Well, you certainly can, Mrs.
Don't assume her gender.
You just said half.
Bums! Don't tell Grebo. He'll cancel me. I mean, they'll cancel me.
I apologize for my gender assumptions.
Oh no, that's all right. Work in progress. Rome wasn't built in a day. She, her. Mrs. Rocking Horse. Jemima Rocking Horse. She, her.
OMG, is that your actual name?
Don't be such a rude sausage.
Oh no, it's fine. Your daughter's right. It is an unusual name. Quite the conversation starter, actually. Like this one.
I'm not his daughter.
Sorry, niece then.
I'm a man. He, him.
I am so sorry. We're all learning, aren't we? Work in progress.
Shut up. You look like Prince.
Thanks.
Oh, you do look like Prince. That excites me. In fact, this whole shop excites me. All the colours, all the flavours. It's Prosecco o'clock. Chutney windmills, foam wizards. It's like a time machine into a more innocent world. Ooh, what's this? A tiny frog? Smiling, made of chocolate. Is this the work of Lewis Carroll?
It's called a Freddo, you doofer.
Freddo? That intrigues me.
Sorry, are you reviewing my shop?
Are you the trip advisor?
Oh, no. Say hello to the new artistic director of the Lindsay House of Wax. You know, for the relaunch.
Oh.
Try one of these, everyone. They're delicious.
Oh, what are they?
Homemade brownies. Made by my husband at home. They're to die for. Try one. Don't mind if I... Sorry?
Oh, sorry, this is my wife. Although that doesn't define her, she, her. She, her shortens popular phrases. It is an endearing affectation.
Yes, it excites me. It's as exciting as... Get rid. End of. As and when. Come on! The brownies won't eat themselves.
I'll have brownies.
What's the verdict? They're amazing, aren't they?
Moist?
Very moist.
Certainly. Moistness to them.
They're better than sex, aren't they? Right. Would you mind awfully doing me an absolutely massive favour and putting up this poster for the relaunch in your shop window? Oh, is that a super soaker? How thrilling. How visceral. Wow, the super soaker excites me. Right, thanks. Love you to the moon and back. Gotta go. Not my cup of.
A little bit dry.
Oh, they were dusty.
They taste of death.
What do you know of death?
This is the Fags, Mags and Bags, I am understanding.
It is, aye. Is that a German accent?
Yes, it is. You are getting full marks. And I am not meaning our discontinued currency.
It is a humour, and they say the Germans don't have a sense of the humour.
Could you please direct me to the chunky Kit Kat that Amy MacDonald has fingered?
What?
I've got this, Dad. Yes, this was Amy MacDonald's favourite shop when she was growing up, actually.
So which of these chunky Kit Kats did Amy MacDonald finger?
I got this, Dad. Well, it wasn't actually these actual chunky Kit Kats, actually, but chunky Kit Kats were her Saturday treat, and it was this section of the chocolate stanchion that she got them from.
Then I will buy all the chunky Kit Kats. I cannot be Amy MacDonald's friend, but I can connect with her in this way. I believe that a part of Amy MacDonald's spirit still resides in this chocolate stanchion, and traces of her DNA. I will place a chunky Kit Kat in the hand of her likeness in the Lindsay House of Wax, I think.
Good idea. Good as ideas. So, that's 4 Ritter Sports and 10 chunky Kit Kats. That's £11 5 pence, please.
Thank you. I am feeling so much closer to Amy now. Gangway, everybody.
A look? Explain.
Come on, Dad. 11 quid of chocolate sold in a oneer. This is solid gold.
But it is lies. You're telling lies, Alok.
Aye, Amy MacDonald's never set foot in this shop, let alone fingered a chunky Kit Kat. We did have Paul Coya in once, but he never fingered any chocolates. He was after directions to the time capsule in Monklands. This was pre-sat-nav, you understand. And I says to him, Coya, I says, you're barking up the wrong tree, you're in Lenzie. And he says, sorry, but my wife Debbie Greenwood was doing the map reading and she got distracted by a bumbler. In retrospect, I think he just said Debbie because he knew her name because she was his wife, but I put 2 and 2 together. He ended up just buying 2 Rubicon mangoes because his AC wasn't working. What were we talking about again?
Dave, how long have you been sitting on that story? Solid gold. That's going straight onto Wiki.
Where are you going?
Cash and carry.
Games and then I'm joining up. So I'm in here and there with them at the moment, but it's hugely exciting about where we're leading and what we're talking about, and I'm sure the players will be excited as well.
Just a couple on Quince. Cool.
British people. Everybody believes in deregulation in theory, generically.
It's a very popular monosyllable.
It's a great phrase, but when you come to ask them what would you like to deregulate, is it health and safety regulation? Is it animal welfare? Is it environmental protection? Is it workers' rights? Of course, the answer to all of them is no, not that one. Then what? What are we going to deregulate that is going to give us this dividend from being free of the European Union?
And this is very live at the moment with the government's bill to tear up all the EU regulations and eventually, I suppose, replace them with British ones. But this kind of sunset clause measure.
Well, I think the sequence goes the other way. It's if we look at Financial Services and Markets Bill, it's tear up EU regulations as we replace them with
ideally
British regulations.
Yeah. So coming back to that fundamental point, given where we are at the moment, can the British economy recover successfully this year and next? And what does peddling hard mean?
Well, let me take the first question. Can the British economy recover successfully? I think we can certainly recover from the recession that we're in now. It will probably be relatively shallow. It will go on longer than anyone would have liked. But I think by the autumn of this year, we'll be able to see that the peak of inflation is behind us, so long as neither the government nor anybody else caves in to excessive wage demands and starts a wage price spiral, which would be disastrous for the economy. But if we get through this period, accepting that our economy has taken a hit and therefore living standards will take a hit, and then we have to rebuild from there. And with respect to my former colleagues now in the government, of course, a Conservative government has to be fiscally responsible before everything else. It has to believe in sound money before everything else. And I think Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak have made that commitment and have reassured markets of that commitment. But it isn't enough on its own. There also has to be a growth agenda.
Absolutely.
How are we going to deliver economic growth? And the Tory party has a challenge here, because many of the things that economists would tell us we need to address in order to solve the UK's growth problem are deeply challenging to the Tory party and its beliefs and values. We need to deal with the shortage of labour in this economy. It means opening up our migration system. We need to deal with blockages in the planning system. We need to get a closer trading relationship with the EU, particularly for services, and that will be deeply problematic for some of my former colleagues. All of these things things need doing if we are going to grow the British economy in order to protect the living standards of British people.
Philip, it almost sounds to me as if you're saying we can get a growth strategy, but not with the Conservative Party.
We can get a growth strategy if we allow what I would call the traditional wing of the Conservative Party, that is a pro-growth party, to triumph. We must not allow those who are anti-growth and inward-looking to triumph over those who are pro-growth and outward-looking.
I suppose the problem is that everybody claims to be pro-growth. Liz Truss would say she was the most pro-growth Prime Minister we've ever had, and that didn't quite turn out that way. So by pro-growth, you mean people who are prepared to have a more liberal immigration policy, who are prepared to take on, as it were, NIMBYism and have more building.
So yes, so there is a problem that there are. It is. They like the environment they live in. They didn't see the need for change, and we have to make a compelling case for economic growth, not least to support the many millions of people for whom life isn't quite so good at the moment, who do need a raise in their standards of living.
So let me crunch this down just a little bit more. Is the immigration policy being promulgated by Suella Braverman at the moment a barrier to growth?
Yes, I think it is, undoubtedly.
And is the economic policy, which means it's very, very hard to build outside the brownfield sites, outside the cities, also a barrier to growth?
Planning policy. Yeah, I mean, as we come out of this recession, the house building industry has been a traditional locomotive pulling the economy out of recession. And we need to make sure that over the next 12 months, we are ready to allow it to perform that traditional role. At the moment, there are all sorts of impediments to building enough homes for the effective demand that we have in the UK.
Let me put you something that Ken Clarke said to me earlier in the week when we were talking about the EU. I put it to him that we couldn't go back into the EU, and you agree with that. So I said, what kind of relationship should we have? And he said, we have to open up into the single market. We have to find ways of lowering those barriers and getting back into that market in any way that it can be done in a way that's acceptable to the British people. Is that the sort of agreement that you would, in other words, some kind of generous new trade agreement with the EU?
Yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I mean, I think even
I can think of a few who would.
Quite a lot of people who are strongly pro-Brexit would still argue that they voted to leave the European Union on the premise that they would still be able to enjoy a very close and privileged trading relationship with the EU. Now look, in goods, the problem is just a pragmatic one. It's about friction at the borders. We have free trade in goods, but we have a cost through the friction at the borders. In time, if relationships improve between the UK and the EU, I expect we can overcome that. But what we need to address is the challenge to our services sector. The UK has a very large and very competitive services business, services, professional services, financial services, creative industries. All of these service businesses need access to the European market. We need labour in the UK, whether we like it or not. If our economy is going to prosper, we're going to have to bring in hundreds of thousands of foreign workers to do the jobs that are currently not being done and which are depressing our GDP growth through the restaurants that are closed, the pubs that can't open 7 nights a week and so on. And there's clearly a deal to be done here between the European Union, which would welcome an ability for labour to move freely.
Capital as well.
Of course, but the clear trade that I see is access to European markets for British services business as of right, in exchange for access to the UK labour market, which we're going to have to open to foreign workers anyway. It seems
so there's a deal to be done.
But it seems to me to be crazy to open our labour market to the world, which we have to do, and get nothing in return, when we could, by treaty, open our labour market to the European Union and get something very valuable to to our economy in exchange.
But if you're Rishi Sunak, you're listening to this and you're observing a growing new revolt on the right of the Conservative Party, maybe ultimately to be led by Boris Johnson again, and you've got Suella Braverman in your cabinet, and beyond that you've got Richard Tice and the Reform Party eating away on the right as well, and you think, I just can't go in, I may agree with Philip Hammond, but I can't go in that direction. In party management terms, it's simply too dangerous.
Well, I understand the party management challenges, and the Tory party has to decide whether it is a party that believes in economic growth and therefore wants to be in power, or whether it is not. Because I put it to my former colleagues, and I put it to you, that a party that doesn't believe in economic growth cannot succeed electorally in this country. The public has a thirst for rising living standards, and that means that we need economic growth, and we have to deliver economic growth. Traditionally, the Tory party has been the party that most effectively communicated that message, that we must deliver economic growth. Right now, because of the Brexit debate partly, and the immigration debate and the planning debate, we've kind of lost our edge in communicating our commitment to economic growth, and we have to find that edge again before the next election.
You know, you've seen the opinion polls, I'm sure. If the Conservative Party under Rishi Sunak doesn't find a new energy and a new agenda for growth, is it on the long stage, the exit door?
Well, I think it will be very difficult to win the next election without having two things. Clearly demonstrated that the government is committed to fiscal responsibility, and I think we're a long way down the road to achieving that, and also articulating a growth agenda, and incidentally, a political narrative which ties those together and explains to the British people what we have to do, why we have to do it, and why it is worth doing it, even if it may feel uncomfortable at the time, because the long-term prize, not just for ourselves but for our children, to ensure that the UK remains one of the world's leading and most prosperous economies, that is a prize worth winning.
And do you think that this current cabinet, including people like Suella Braverman, understands that?
I can't speak for whether the whole cabinet understands it, but I know that leading members of the cabinet certainly do get it, and I think we've made, frankly, a large amount of progress since October, but there is still quite a long way to go, and not a huge amount of time left to go there.
Philip Hammond, Lord Hammond, thanks very much for what's been a really interesting and urgent conversation. Thank you. It's 6:51. Now, was this the week Boris Johnson started laying the groundwork for another run at number 10? We're going to be looking at the big political stories of the week with some of Westminster's best journalists. It's 6:51.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
If you have a heart attack or a stroke, you can expect an average wait time for an ambulance of 90 minutes. Welcome to Britain in 2023.
Ian Dale on LBC. Life doesn't come with a map to guide you, or a compass to show you the way. So it makes sense to trust those who walk that path every day and know how to smoothly navigate any bump in the road. When it comes to buying, selling, or letting your home, let Romans be your guide. Whatever direction your property journey is taking, even if you just want some sound advice, Romans will get you there. Visit romans.co.uk.
How many subscriptions do you have? And how many do you really use? Households right now are spending an average of £422 a year. With the Lloyds Bank Subscriptions Manager on our app, you can block or cancel the ones you no longer need in a few simple taps. It's one of our many useful tools to help you stay on top of your money. To find out more, go to lloydsbank.com/cost of living. Lloyds Bank, by your side.
The Vodafone Big Winter Sale is now on. Switch to Vodafone Full Fibre Broadband from only £22 per month for 24 months. Full Fibre Broadband is up to 5 times more reliable than standard broadband. That's reliable broadband without the price tag. Just one of the amazing offers in the Vodafone Big Winter Sale. Go online or in-store today. Ends 26th of January. Vodafone.
CPI plus 3.9% price increase each April. Price increase after 24 months. Credit acceptance and availability checks, terms and verification at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
These days, it's nice to know what you're getting. Like the same when you tuck into our tasty breakfast. The same yes when your kids stay and eat breakfast for free. The same knowing there are over 800 hotels. And the same every time you sink into one of our super comfy beds. Enjoy the same feeling whatever the trip. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Only available to book at premierinn.com. T's and C's apply. Up to 2 kids stay and eat breakfast free with a full paying adult.
Tonight with Andrew Marr on LBC.
It's 6:53 now. The first Westminster week of 2023 is coming towards its end. So, what did we learn? With me in the studio for our weekly panel is Rosa Prince, editor of The House, Parliament's magazine, coming to be editor of Politico's London Playbook in due course, and Gabriel Pogrund, Whitehall editor at The Times. And both of you know a great deal more than I do, so let me start with you, Rosa. It's been a very interesting first week in many ways, where we've seen the two main parties start to sort of flesh out their strategies for the year ahead. What did you make of the PMQ's clash, first of all?
Yeah, well, the big takeaway from that was Rishi Sunak finally fessing up that he has had private healthcare. I mean, it might seem a trivial thing, but I think what it shows is Labour's line of attack, not just for this year, but going into the election. They're going to want to paint him as the millionaire. He's out of touch, multi-millionaire, out of touch with ordinary people, particularly at a time of strife, at a time of a cost of living crisis, industrial relations going haywire. How can he, with his private healthcare, say no to the nurses?
They're going for his personal circumstances and wealth and all of that in a way that I suspect he will find personally agonising. He's quite a private man. He hates talking about that kind of stuff, and yet he's going to have to between now and 2024.
I think that was the equation. So I think the reason he didn't answer the question when he was asked it over the weekend was because he just didn't want to. As you say, he doesn't like it. He's a private guy. But I think he felt he needed to lance the boil, get it out of the way. If he didn't answer, he was just going to get asked over and over again.
Yeah, time to lance that boil. Gabriel, I said he was going to be, or I implied he was going to be there until 2024, but of course the other thing that happened this week is a certain Boris Alexander the Pfeffel Johnson unveiled a portrait of himself at the Carlton Club and made a rousing speech about the importance of tax-cutting Tories coming back and all the rest of it. What would it do in your judgment to the Tory party if Johnson actually tried to remove Sunak, perhaps this spring after bad local election results in May?
I mean, it's I think Johnson, when asked once why he had abandoned our lowly profession and become a politician, he said that people don't make statues of journalists, this week he's not quite been chiseled in stone, but he's got
paint, oil paint. Yeah, he's got the oil paint.
Tory Mecca that is the Carlton Club. I mean, it's quite an interesting situation right now where he's not sort of really touching this campaign being waged by Lord Cruddas of Shoreditch to reinstate him. But I mean, as we know from his deposition of Theresa May, or at least a sort of proxy campaign he waged for much of her premiership, he doesn't actually need to say things in order to be saying them. He's sort of hanging over the party like a sword of Damocles once again. I think the parliamentary party, though, just is not there. He continues to have people who believe that the party can't win a general election or a majority without him. But I think that the political opinion of the party, especially now, I mean, I think the kind of collective blood pressure of Westminster has fallen under Sunak. And I think that most of the party are sort of quite content with that, even if not with the letter of everything Sunak's doing.
I think that's absolutely right. It's pretty strange, Rosa, that it's the Labour Party, when it comes to something like the health service, who seem to be coming up with the radical ideas and sometimes the challenging ideas. They've been the ones talking about bringing more private money or using more private sector care to deal with the problems of waiting lists and changing the system of primary care and indeed banning smoking in this country. Can you remember a time when the opposition was making so much running and their policies were being swiped so egregiously by the governing party?
Probably not. Going back to 1997 when it felt like Labour was setting the agenda. And I think on health, I think Keir Starmer was very smart, whether you agree with his policies or not, to bring someone like Wes Streeting into that brief, because he's young and dynamic and sort of forward-facing, and I think he's made a big difference to them. They're in a bit of a tricky spot on strikes because they don't want to look like they're going to be throwing money around at everyone. But again, there's a strong performer there in Rachel Reeves, who seems to be able to be quite staunch on that, and they seem to have had a great couple of weeks.
They have had a very good couple of weeks. Gabriel, thinking about that so-called anti-strike legislation, I think the politics of this are really interesting, aren't they? Because clearly Rishi Sunak, who is a fighter and won't give up easily, we should say.
Not a quitter.
Not a quitter, exactly. He thinks that, in a sense, he's got Starmer and the Labour Party on the edge of a spike, that the country doesn't want strikes, doesn't like the idea of strikes, and if they think that the Labour Party are supporting strikes because the unions are paying for the Labour Party, will react against them. And yet Starmer clearly thinks this is all completely untrue. If this law results in individual people, nurses or ambulance staff or whoever it is, actually being arrested and cuffed and prosecuted rather than institutions like unions, won't that be a really big self-harm moment for the Tory party?
I believe so. I mean, I think so. I mean, Rosa alluded earlier to the kind of existing fault line that Labour's trying to draw between Sunak, this wealthy occupant of the Sunday Times rich list on one hand, and then ordinary people on the other. And I mean, it's one thing to pillory the unions and the hard left, as any self-respecting Tory strategist would do, but I think that there has been a change in narrative surrounding some of the unions, or at least some of what they're asking for. I mean, from Labour's... Sorry.
Yeah, so we're running out. I just want to congratulate you, first of all, for responding in any way to the most labyrinthine and incomprehensible question ever asked on British radio. So thank you very much for that.
I hope my answer wasn't incomprehensible.
It certainly wasn't. And Rosa, just a yes or no, general election in 2023?
No.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, if you've missed any of today's shows, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player coming up at 10 on LBC. It's Nick Abbott, but for now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew. If I, in the middle of this programme, suffer a stroke or a heart attack, given current performance rates, I might expect an ambulance to arrive in around 90 minutes, by which time I might well be dead. How can this be in Britain in 2023? Governments have fallen over less. Most of us now expect that we're going to have a bad ambulance or A&E experience. How as a nation has it come to this? At 8, I want to concentrate on the challenges facing small businesses. If you run or work for a small business, I want to hear from you. And at 9, in the light of the Lee Ryan conviction today, is it time to ban alcohol on planes?
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, the RMT union says it's working with train operators towards a revised offer following more talks to end further strike action. General Secretary Mick Lynch says both sides have agreed to meet again over the next few days. LBC's Westminster editor Ben Kentish told Andrew Marr there's no offer on the table yet, but the two sides do seem to be getting closer.
The RMT union saying that they had detailed discussions and are working jointly towards a revised offer. The TSSA, another one of the transport unions, describing those talks as interesting and detailed, and one well-placed government source telling me that talks this week in general have been constructive.
1 in 10 people were left waiting for ambulances for more than 3.5 hours after falling seriously ill. Figures from NHS England for December are the worst on record. The Foreign Office is supporting the families of 2 British aid workers in Ukraine after unverified reports a body has been found. 48-year-old Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry, who's 28, were last seen on Friday. They've been headed to the city of Soledar, which is now mostly under the control of Russian forces. Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik has told Tonight with Andrew Marr Moscow is desperate to achieve a victory after months on the back foot.
It is very important for Russians to get any of the cities, Bakhmut or Soledar or any of the surroundings, first of all, to show any kind of victory to Russian people, because they did not have any battlefield victory a while, and they are compensating for it by constant shelling of our cities, showing that they still have an upper hand in this war. However, it is not true.
Boy band singer Lee Ryan has been found guilty of racially abusing a member of a British Airways cabin crew. The court heard how the Blue Star was slurring his words and staggering around during the flight from Glasgow to London last July. Having drank a whole bottle of port before boarding, he grabbed Leah Gordon's wrists after being refused more alcohol. Labour has warned of wider issues with the prison system after an aggressive driver was spared jail because they're full. 29-year-old Fabian Greco from Dartford was given an 18-week suspended sentence after admitting assault. He'd punched and kicked a fellow driver who'd confronted him after the pair almost crashed. Shadow Justice Secretary and Labour MP Steve Reid has told LBC the government is to blame.
Since the Conservatives came to power, they've got rid of 10,000 cells, so there are fewer places to lock people up. Now, they were forced to U-turn on this not long ago. They said they would build 1,000 new cells, but where are they? They haven't built them, and so because of that, we're in a situation where judges are no longer able to lock up dangerous criminals, and instead they're left on the streets.
And Rishi Sunak's on his first visit to Scotland since becoming Prime Minister. He's meeting Nicola Sturgeon privately this evening before a joint announcement from them tomorrow. They'll reveal millions of pounds of UK government funding, which Downing Street says is aimed at promoting growth. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 69 points at 77.94. The pound buys $1.21 and €1.12. LBC weather: cloudy and wet for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and parts of Wales tonight. Drier towards the south, lows of 3. Bright spells and scattered showers in the north tomorrow. Largely dry and sunny in the south, highs of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale.
A very good evening. It is 7 minutes past on LBC. Welcome to the programme. It's Ian Dale here with you until 10. Now, we're going to talk about a subject which we have talked about many times on the programme before over the past few months, and many other of my colleagues have covered as well. But I make no apology for covering it again, because if you don't keep the spotlight on these issues, if they don't keep in the headlines, then there's little impetus on the part of politicians to do anything about it. We're going to talk about ambulance waiting times, because some horrifying new figures out today. It shows that if you have a heart attack, you're probably going to wait 90 minutes or more to get an ambulance. 90 minutes. Now, I'm not a medic, but I know that if you have a stroke or a cardiac arrest, every minute counts, particularly if you have a stroke, because the oxygen doesn't go to your brain, and every minute that there's a delay, that increases the risk of permanent brain damage. So when you read that the average wait time is more than 90 minutes to reach emergency calls such as heart attacks, that's 5 times longer than the target time. In some regions it's 150 minutes. Response times for the highest priority calls, such as cardiac arrests, are taking close to 11 minutes, 4 minutes longer than they should. More than a third of patients in A&E are waiting longer than 4 hours. 1 in 7 patients are waiting more than 12 hours for a bed on a ward when they need to be admitted. Routine operations are waiting, the number of people waiting for treatment has fallen slightly, but very slightly. It's still over £7 million. So, I mean, all sorts of questions come to mind here. Is it down to lack of funding. Ben, on a tweet, says, surely after 13 years of Tory austerity, you can't seriously ask how the UK has become a failed state, defund public services and then complain they don't work. Even you, Ian, surely you can understand this. Well, I don't believe that the health service has been defunded. If you look at the actual figures of the money going into the health service, in 2010 it was around £100 billion a year. Now it is £160 billion a year. Now health demands have increased, that is true. But are you seriously telling me that a 60% increase in funding is austerity for the health service? Because I would have to challenge you. It most certainly is not. We have not had 60% inflation since 2010. Now, we're told that health service inflation is 4%, or probably more than that this year, I suppose, but on average it's 4%, and therefore the funding hasn't kept up with that. Well, virtually every few months the government announces some more money. I think it goes much deeper than that. But if you work in the ambulance service, if you work in anything related to that in the NHS, I'd love to hear from you. Because what I don't really comprehend is how this is going to be fixed in the short term. Because if it was just a case of, well, put more money in, you can do that and fix it. But it isn't, is it? It's much deeper than that. And then Ben Kentish will tell us, in fact, let's get Ben on the line now. Ben, you've got some interesting polling news today.
Yes, Ian, we have some exclusive polling seen by LBC reveals just how concerned, just how pessimistic people are about whether or not the NHS would be there if they needed it. The poll by Savanta, Ian, found that 79% of people think that if they need an ambulance in an emergency, they will face a long wait before they get one. Even more, 83% predict that if they do make it to A&E, they would face another hours and hours long delay while they sit in A&E and in pain. And even then, 3 in 4, Ian, 74% of people believe that if they are required to enter hospital for treatment, they face likely being treated in a corridor because of a lack of available beds. One other stat for you, this is really shocking, I think. 37% of people in this country now believe that because of a lack of NHS dentistry appointments, they themselves will have to resort to doing it themselves, to DIY dentistry if they get into trouble. That's Savanta poll for the Liberal Democrats, Ian, really revealing just how much the debate about the NHS and the difficulties it is in is cutting through. Voters losing faith almost completely that the health service will be there when they need it. The government say the current stats that we've had out today are not acceptable, that it is a priority. But in opposition parties say that these findings are a damning indictment of the government's record. Daisy Cooper is the Liberal Democrat spokesperson on health.
I think what's happened now is that the underinvestment by the Conservative government in our NHS means that the NHS is now stuck in a doom loop. So people won't get the emergency care they need fast enough. That means that they're going to have worse health outcomes. That's going to increase their long-term disability. That's going to have a cost to the economy. It's going to have a personal cost to them. And it means we're going to have to invest even more in our health and care services. The government, because of its years of neglect, have now pushed the NHS loop. Needs to act urgently if it's going to reverse that.
Ian, just finally, we did ask the government for a response several hours ago to these findings. One is yet to arrive. Another delay, I'm afraid, in the health system.
Well, there's usually a delay in government ministers answering anything these days. I actually can't remember the last time we had a government minister on the programme, and believe me, that's not for lack of asking. It'd be quite interesting to know what they're going to do to at least ameliorate this in the short term, because you can't wave a wand and fix it overnight. I do get that, but it's not as if they haven't been warned. I'd love to know why NHS managers haven't done more to alleviate this, because having this conversation, it always looks as if you're sort of attacking the ambulance service, and I'm absolutely not, because I don't believe that that this is down to them. It is due to, in part, a lack of management on the part of NHS England. It may well be in part to a lack of funding. I'm waiting for you to give me the details on that. Lots of people sort of saying, well, it has to be this. Claire has sent me a text saying, isn't that a chunk of money that's gone into the NHS for the COVID PPE, a lot of which is unusable? Can you check that out? Well, the figures I'm quoting you are from the King's Fund, and they're not to do with COVID funding, because if you include that, it then shoots up even more. But the percentage that we now spend on the NHS is 0.1% less than Germany spends on health. So, I mean, as we always say in these conversations, you can spend 30% of your GDP on health, and it would still never be enough. You would still never be able to meet every demand that is made on the health service. And at some point, somebody has to explain where that line has to be drawn. But I'm more interested in this hour in talking about the effects. I want to hear your own experiences as well, good and bad, because not everyone is waiting 90 minutes. Let's make that very clear. Neil Alexander is National Investigator for the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch. He's been looking into the reasons for ambulance delays. Neil, very good evening to you. How much is this down to underfunding?
So, Ian, that's certainly one thing. This investigation I've been involved with, we haven't looked at funding in itself. What we've looked at is more around the systems of safety that are in place. So what we've looked at really is one of the big factors that has come out of the investigation so far in the early stages was when ambulances turn up the door of a hospital, they were unable to offload patients into emergency departments because the hospitals were full. Beds were because patients were unable to be discharged out from wards and hospitals. We were hearing situations where patients were being bedded in surgical wards because there was no room on wards. So your hospitals were full, and certain statistics from NHS England suggest that as well. So if you don't have that flow through hospitals, you end up with ambulances queuing outside the front door of a hospital. And what that then creates is this unknown risk in the community where people are calling 999 and asking for help, and ambulances aren't able to respond because they're waiting outside an emergency department.
Well, with respect, I mean, we know all of that. We've known all of that for some time, haven't we? But what in the short term can be done about it? Because you can't just magic thousands of hospital beds out of thin air. The government have announced an initiative to create more bed space, but it's a bit of a sticking plaster, and I think it's only going to create another 1,000 beds over the country.
So in June we made two recommendations to the Department of Health in June last year, so June 2022. But one of those was very much around the Department of Health coming up with an emergency or an urgent response to the situation, because I think what we saw was a difficulty over last winter, and we were predicting a challenging winter this winter. So we asked the Department of Health in the recommendation to look at this problem for them. And then we also looked at them, we asked them to look at a longer term piece of work, which would look at safety challenges for patients as they move between the health and the social care system.
And have they responded? I mean, you're saying this is June 2022. We're now in January 2023. Yes, there has been a lot of political upheaval since then, but this work would have been done presumably by NHS England, sort of one step removed from the Department of Health. What has transpired?
So we have received a response from the Department of Health, and we're still working through that at the minute, especially now as the situation seems to be getting worse. We'll be publishing that in due course.
Is there something you think the government ought to be doing that they're not?
Well, as I said, we're still working through with the Department of Health. We're looking at the response that they've given us in light of the additional evidence that we've gathered, and see if that response is going to address what we think, what we know the patient safety.
When are you expecting this response to materialise?
Well, they have given us a response. We're just working through it with the new evidence that we've gathered over the last couple of months. So we hope to have that published within the next couple of months.
Okay, Neil, thank you very much. That's Neil Alexander from the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch. We'll come to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. It's 7:16.
This is LBC.
Now that the holiday season is over, many timeshare owners are facing a winter of expensive upkeep. With rising inflation, now more than ever, we need to look after our money. If you own a timeshare in Spain or the Canaries and bought it after 5th of January 1999, you may have been...
campaigns.